Hello, everybody. Pretty excited to be here in London, all the way on the other side of the pound. I live in San Francisco, but I'm French, so it's the other side of 2 pounds for me. So pretty fun. Today we're here to talk about webhook, but I know we're waiting also for the food. You're like the last talk before the food, so I will show you some food to get your attention right now, and hopefully you will stick with me for the content that's coming after. This is my Twitter handle. If you want to continue the conversation afterwards, I'll be happy to discuss more and get involved into some lovely internet chats. As Alice mentioned, I work for Typeform. We are what we decide to call ourselves now. It's an interface company. We are mainly known for our forms. So one question at a time forms, making them interactive, making them look cool. If you want to try your live form, you should stop by the Hoopy booth. They have a developer relationship survey, and they use Typeform for it, so you get a chance to see how it looks like. But we also just launched Video Ask, which is a video interaction app, so I really encourage you to give it a try, especially in the community space. It's a good way to get feedback on the stuff you're working on. And so we're here today to talk about webhooks with those lovely characters. And you don't know yet, maybe, but webhooks are actually a natural thing. I think they can be inspired by the spiders and what the spiders are doing when they try to eat. If I understood well how it works, they make a web and just wait for someone to get catch on the web. Usually it's a bug. And then when the bug gets catch, they just receive a notification on the web directly, like, there is someone that gets catch, you should have, like, dinner is served almost. So there's a simple notification, and an event happens, the web moves, go get you lunch or dinner. You do that also when you're a student. You have your own webhook interface that's called a microwave. You put the food inside a microwave, and whenever it's get ready, you have a ding notification that something has happened. So we are kind of surrounded by webhook-like interfaces. So you should be familiar with this mechanism. So we can all agree on something on what webhook means in this specific use case. The idea is like something happens on a platform, usually it's your platform, and you will get notified through it through HTTP request. Do we all agree on this? Awesome. I'll tell you what's our challenge at Typeform. For us, we collect a lot of data, but people don't really consume the data on our platform. The data moves away. We're usually the first thing that people use to collect leads, to ask for feedback, but we're not where they consume and analyze this data. So it goes away. The main interaction for those things to go away is right now through a lot of no-code solutions, a lot of workflow apps where this is an example of someone doing sentiment analysis. So you receive a lot of feedback. You want to do the sentiment analysis of people like your product or not. You connect that to an IBM Watson. You connect that to AWS similar APIs, or I'm sure Google has something like this. And then they get stored at somewhere else. So we are in the phase of workflows, and we fit into those workflows. To empower those workflows, we use all the webhooks. We started by having webhook first. We didn't have APIs. It's only really recently that we started to have APIs. But thanks to those webhooks, we managed to keep our users active and come up with a lot of use cases on how people can connect the Typeforms. If we didn't have those webhooks, I don't think we were able to get the same growth, and I don't think we will be able to have the same fan base, kind of, people that were hiking around. So if you're wondering what you should build now, if you're a company, you're like, oh, should we do the API first or we should do webhook? I will really encourage you to go webhook first, specifically now that there's like this whole no-code movement, and if you want to be part of it, if you want to be an actor of it, if you want to be involved in it, you have to get webhooks to be integrated with Zapier, Parabola, all the other codes like this. Also, the thing that if we look at for the developers, for them, it's pretty easy to get started. They almost don't have to get a buy-in from any of the DevOps team. It's simple as doing a Lambda function or a Google clone function or a glitch project. It's just an endpoint somewhere that will receive data and do some actions on it. So they can get started very quickly. They get to see the first result really quickly, and they will adopt your product in a more faster way. So you have a lot of bunch of reasons to use webhooks. As I said, try to use webhooks and implement those webhooks at early beginning, because I hope you see some results. Now that you've decided to use the webhooks and you decided to make your product webhook friendly, let's look at what would be the experience for developers. I'll tell you what we did first. When I joined Typeform about a year and a half ago, we decided to be consistent because for some reason, we were not sending the same data in the right order all the time. So if you fill a form once with your name, last name, and all the things, and you fill this form a second time, the webhook events were totally different and totally mixed up. So the first thing we did, we said, we'll be consistent. So you have the same event in the same order all the single time. It's pretty easy to get started. Then we gave the power to our developers, and that was probably one of the first things we implemented, to test webhooks. Especially for something like us that is connected to other workflows, people might not want to put real data at the beginning. They want to get a try of what would be the payload and what would be what I get to see and what I will be dealing with if I have real data. Just send me a test, and I will see what I can do with this, and I'll eventually do some manipulation around this. So if you're able to do this, in our case, it just mimics the structure of your form, and we send you random data. The second thing we implemented, and we get inspired by other companies in the industry, mainly GitHub around that. They really had that for a long time. We give you an interface to inspect both sides, what we sent you, the request, and what you sent us back. So like this, you have directly a feedback of how did this event go, and you can look at what we sent you, and you can tell us if it went well or not. So we also added some visual stuff. So my example is pretty bad because everything is green, but in case it's not green, we'll tell you, it will give you a red, and we'll give you also the response code that you sent us. So when there's something happening, you can also look into this. We'll also give you the kind of a trace, like go back into the history so you can see where you need to fill the issues and if there was any issues over this. Something that we also got from GitHub, and we got inspired to use this, is redelivering the webhook. When you deal with a lot of events, when you deal with real data, and especially long forms like us, they can be complicated. It's kind of painful to go one by one, filling all the single fields. And once you've done this, if you have to do that every single time you make changes to your code, it's even more cumbersome. So we have a simple redeliver button where we just send the same event, and you have the same payload. Like this, you don't mess up with your real data either. I will say that if you implement webhooks, you should be really careful about your retry policy and be really straightforward to your users about this. If something fails, so like if the delivery doesn't work, how many times are you going to try to send it again? How many times you will try, really? It's on them to be up in that time. For us, we try to do like, I think it's logarit version of it. So we try really a number of times really quickly after the first fail, and then we space it out. Like this also, and then that's how you decide to implement it later or not in your backend. You can decide that if a webhook has failed so many times, you can turn it off, so we won't send any events until they turn it back on their own. That's something you do. You decide if you do it. We don't do it for now. This is examples from Shopify and Stripe. I encourage you to have that specifically in your documentation as well. Something I really like also, and that's something I've seen from Nihilus. So Nihilus is an API that integrates with your emails. They send you an email notification when your webhook is not feeling really good. So as you're working on your webhook integration with them, you're doing a lot of failures, you try and errors, they don't send you anything. But one is like kind of a production level, when they estimate that, okay, you're done and it's like receiving real traffic. If it's failing, they will send you an email. It's like, oh, by the way, this whole thing over there is not working. Probably you should pay attention to it. There's something that needs to be fixed. So I will say that's a good attention to have, probably something harder to integrate, but you get to build a feedback loop with your users and let them know when something wrong is happening. Something that has become a standard, that has been inspired by Slack, GitHub, and others, is signing your webhook payload. We started to do that at Typeform also. The idea is for a user to identify that the request that's coming on their webhook endpoint is legitimate and comes from you as a provider. So because everybody can discover a URL and hit it and eventually try to harm your system. With this in place, you can make sure that the API call comes from Typeform. This is the secret that you have put in place. You decrypt it, and have authenticity on this. It's a bit harder to integrate for users, so we usually recommend when they do trials to not use it, so they go faster and they get to the success quicker. But it's also a better practice when it goes into production. And it's a challenge for you when you do the documentation. So you make sure that all your documentations integrate examples and shortcuts. So it's almost integrated and you don't have to think about it. Something that I found interesting also was an interesting example from Twitch. So Twitch, when you add a webhook event and a webhook URL to their app, they do what they call a challenge. So they want to verify that this endpoint, this URL exists. So what they do, you have your Twitch server on the side and you have your webhook endpoint. They will send you, and I think Slack does this as well, they will send you a first post request and say, okay, we sent you a challenge. This is the payload of the challenge. Just answer back and tell us what you got. And you just do a response on it and you send back the payload. Pretty simple thing to integrate. Like this, for them, they are sure that the URL belongs to the user, that the URL exists, and that they're not going to send requests in the wild. They do that regularly, I think, also to check the health of the URL. The main issue here for you, if you implement this, it's just like another step in the setup process. So it can also be complicated for a user, and you may lose another churn over there. Something that we did, and as we're really webhook driven, that really helped us, we decided to put this whole webhook functionality into an API that's accessible to our partners. When you use Zapier, Typeform for Zapier, it actually creates a webhook on the form for you on your behalf, tagged as a Zapier webhook. Like this, we can easily get integrated with other type of partners, and this is for them very easy to integrate. So when a lot of our integrations start from the webhook point, if we didn't have an API, it would have been a manual process. Everybody will have to say, okay, hit your endpoint here, copy this endpoint into your interface. Really, really hard to do, and also a way to drop off users. So instead, we have an API, we can automate this process. We added the corresponding OAuth scope, so anybody that has the permissions to do it can create webhooks on your behalf. And as well, we added delivery, so if you want to check the health of your webhook endpoint and your relationship with Typeform, you can check how many of the deliveries went well and how many didn't go well. Something that I really like, and something that's really important also for us on the workflow use case, we added the possibility to add more than one webhook to a form. So if you have this possibility, I will encourage you to do that. For a while, our interface was only showing you one webhook, while our API will let you do more. So we decided to put that directly into the interface because we have a lot of users that say, okay, now when someone submits Typeform, I want that add to MailChimp, I want that add to Airtable, and Slack. All this at the same time. So they're all 3 different webhooks. So if you're able to give that possibility, I will really encourage you to do so. And specifically, because you can also have like a dev or a production environment when you can switch on very quickly. Yes, this is exactly what we said. Yeah, namespacing was interesting in that case. So people can, we don't restrict that specifically, but people can restrict a name. So you know that there's a webhook called Zapier. This is you, webhook, as a Zapier company. So no one should be scratching this workspace. And so you can always retrieve easily if a form is specifically integrated with your app, as you have tagged a webhook with your name. Again, an example from GitHub, something we don't do yet, and this is something I wish we were doing better. If you have built your whole infrastructure around microservices and event-driven stuff, should be easier to build, is the possibility to send more events than, in our case, just submission. So if you look, those are a couple of examples from GitHub. They let you subscribe to many events that are happening on a repo, that's happening on a user, when they change, when they update it, when they delete. Like this, you're a bit more reactive. And again, that's happening, that's helps you power all those workflow apps. Because if we were able to update someone when the form was changed, then eventually there's a policy that needs to be changed somewhere. There's someone that needs to approve it. If the form was changed, maybe we should send a notification somewhere in Slack. At the moment, this is not possible because our only webhook event is when someone submits a form. So if you're redesigning your webhook mindset, if you're redesigning your webhook strategy, think about all the different events that people can subscribe to. That will give you more power, and it will give you definitely more powers to your users. Something that we haven't done, and I think it's a great thing to do, that we're looking at eventually doing, our webhook payload is kind of obscure and not easy to get at the beginning, the way we structured it. It will less likely change because legacy, we're not going to change that. But we can help our users to understand how to deal with it easily. So eventually we'll create, and there are like already some created by the community, handlers to get to the data quicker. So in our case, if you want to filter all the responses that someone filled into a form and you just want to extract the email, we should be able to give you a tool like this instead of you having to parse the JSON and find this information and like we'll do all the hard work. The idea will abstract that for you and you will find it for yourself. So if your webhook event and your webhook payload is not really straightforward, adding that to your SDK could be a huge win also for adoptions of users. When we talk about webhooks, we also talk about a lot of HTTP requests. And right now, I feel that serverless and all those serverless functions are taking over the HTTP world and the servers differently. What we've seen, and I've listed a couple of examples here, is companies like Twilio, or PubNub, or Netlify that are powering directly into their own interface a serverless environment. Like this, you can attach to a specific event, not an HTTP endpoint, but a function directly, and you're still in their own environment to write that function. In the end, it's still an HTTP request. It's still an HTTP attached to the function you've built, but they stay on your own company, on your own environment. There used to be a project powered by O0, and I think it was called O0 Extent, where their whole idea was to provide this as a tool so all of us could implement that on our own, and we can be as powerful as Twilio function. Sadly, I think it died, but there are many other ways to do this, and I think if you implement this, you also reduce the friction for your users. They don't have to think about where they host the code and what you could do with it. Other alternatives are things like Standard Library and Glitch. So Standard Library, they also provide a serverless infrastructure. And eventually, they have an API where you can automatically create a function on behalf of the user and have a template for this function. For now, what we've been using and what has been working for us is Glitch. So Glitch, if you're not familiar with it, it's like an online IDE, mainly for the Node, JavaScript, HTML world, and with the possibility to do remix. So remix is like a fork of your project. The good thing about this is as you launch a project, it already has a URL. It's already available on the internet. So the time to action for a developer that's remixing your project and that wants to interact with your webhook is reduced a lot. And we have a lot of people using this. So I will really encourage you to look at those solutions. All right, so pretty simple takeaways. If you don't have webhooks yet, please build webhooks. It's a way to communicate and build better integration between each other. If you build webhooks, try to have a dedicated developer experience effort on this. Your users will thank you. There are definitely experiences that we can build so everybody has informed data about what's going on with those webhooks. And eventually, if you have the engineering power to do so, add some native serverless experience around that. That's probably what's happening and what's coming for all of us. And eventually, some of those providers will white label it for us. So it will make it easier. Right, I think that's all for me. I hope you liked it. And if you have any questions, let's talk afterwards.